It is day 13 postpartum, and I am here with a very dear friend of mine, Shannon is what I call her. And she's also a mom of 7, and actually Zeke's godmother. So we're just gonna have just kind of honest, raw discussion about postpartum, about the mindset, about our preparation. So we're just gonna have a raw. She's prepared some questions, and I'll share my experience and also my perspective in situation. So awesome.
Okay. One of the questions I was thinking of, Jenny, was right now there's a lot of prep out there physically for what you're going to experience postpartum, but there's not a lot out there that prepares you mentally and emotionally for that time frame. So what would you say would be the best way for women to prepare for that?
Okay, so my opinion in so many things right now is that there's really a robbery of preparation for so many women, whether it's motherhood, whether it's postpartum, whether it's married life. And I think the crisis that I'm seeing is that it's almost like only parts of women matter. And we're only equipping women with, financial success or maybe physical health or exercise, but not really the whole woman. Mm-hmm. And so it's same with pregnancy. It's a lot of the physical preparation, which only hits one part of the woman. Right. And so then all of a sudden a woman gets, pregnant, has a baby, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, I'm physically fit, but my mind is exhausted and I'm anxious. So I think we need to first acknowledge that there isn't really preparation, because I think it gives us permission to feel like, okay, I've been robbed and nothing's wrong with me. It's not that something's wrong with me. It's just that nobody prepared me. Mm-hmm. And that's important, because then we beat ourselves over guilt. Did you feel that? And shame.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I always say, like, it's almost like beating ourselves over for writing a paper. We end up getting a D when nobody ever taught us ABC. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Right? And so we beat ourselves over and over, like, oh my gosh, I got a D, but nobody ever taught us how to read. And that's kind of what I feel like so many times being a woman is. So that's, I think, first thing is permission that there's a lack of preparation, so that we don't walk into guilt and shame. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I think it's important to recognize that we're all kind of swimming against the same lack of preparation, because that tendency is to look at other women and say, oh, she's got it together, and there's a comparison, a competition, and we feel inadequate, and the spiral rabbit hole of I'm not good enough I think begins. And the main thing that we need to understand is that our mind affects our bodies. Absolutely. Right? The mental exhaustion causes physical stress in our body. Yes. And if we don't recognize that, and we're just preparing our bodies but not our mind, it's only a matter of time until our bodies kind of break down, because we're driven mentally by our bodies are driven by our thoughts. Right. Okay, and there's a sort of our thoughts affect our emotion impact our physical body, and physical body then impacts every part of our spiritual life. And so it's important to understand the neuroscience behind our emotion and our body. So how do we prepare ourselves? So that's the first thing, is acknowledging there's no preparation. Second thing is to know that most women are going through the same thing. Mm-hmm. And number 3, I think we need to be very intentional, if possible, to prepare prior to our mental and our emotional state, which is all connected. So how do we do that? We really need to take an inventory on how we manage our thoughts. An inventory on, do we go to automatic negative thoughts, worst case scenario, or best case scenario? Do we make a big deal out of a lot of things throughout the day? Do we have the tools to manage our mind? Do we understand the impact of managing our mind that impacts our emotion? Do we have the scripts to be able to draw boundaries and replacing guilt and shame to hope and learning? So how do you prepare yourself as a mom today? Practically speaking, I go to mindset training books. Unfortunately, and obviously we're creating this mindset postpartum training class because I want to be able to cater postpartum mindset training specific to moms. Excuse me while I try to have a real life situation. And then so I'm going to tell you kind of what I have done, and it really is it's a work. And I think it's not just even postpartum, it's I think motherhood, is that we can't manage our home unless we manage our mind. And so how do we do that? We first need to know, like, how do we actually manage our mind? Am I really, do we need to take an inventory of the words we use? I'm so stressed. This is horrible. This is awful. I'm so exhausted, because there's a part in our brain called a reticular activator that expands what we focus on. So the words we use, if we're constantly saying I'm stressed, we actually look for evidence that we're stressed. So when you were pregnant, all of a sudden you start to see all the pregnant ladies because your reticular activator is actually heightenedly aware of the fact that, okay, you're pregnant, and so now you're seeing all the pregnant ladies. That's the same thing with I'm so stressed, I'm so exhausted. So first we need to take a mental inventory of how we manage our mind, period.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the first thing, is awareness. And then the second thing is that we need to know how to replace these, I would say, habitual reactions. So for example, Shani, give me a kind of a script that moms go through of,
what they did, like a negative script.
Yeah, a negative script, yeah.
I should have, a lot of should haves.
Mm-hmm.
I should have been more patient. I should have,
Mm-hmm.
I just, there's a lot of should haves. A lot of moms
Mm-hmm.
do that. At the end of the day, they go through all the stuff that they should have done.
Yeah. And so learning how to say progress over perfection.
Right.
Life happens for me, not to me. Today, I did the best I could.
Right.
And so really, I in our training, I just did a training on this yesterday. Like, what is our initial reaction? That's an important thing, because our initial reaction usually tells us, like, oh, that's my habitual pattern. Like, if I automatically go to, oh, I cannot do this,
mm-hmm.
then that tells me that you have given yourself a limited belief. Belief is so powerful. So really, it's not ever one thing. And that's why I tell women and the women's school is that, managing our mind is not one solution. It's actually looking at every part of the woman. And so that's the first thing, is that managing our words. In the hospital, while I was there, I listened to motivational videos. I listened to mindset videos. I really I wrote my scripts of what to say when things weren't working out, so that I wasn't going down the road of, like, worst case scenario, because he was in the NICU for 10 days. He wasn't breathing well. And, I made a decision to look at the best case scenario and find the good in every situation. I literally, went into gratitude scripts every second. Like, I was just saying, I'm so grateful for, thank God for this. I'm so grateful that I'm driving 3 hours a day to the NICU, even though, there was inconveniences. So again, on my gratitude script, I don't actually allow myself to look at things that would add more stress, but that's also including talking to people that would add more stress. So boundaries are key. A lot of times we don't know how to deal with boundaries, and especially as new moms, opinions, and
Absolutely.
like, you should do this, and the grandmother says this, and so I always have a script. I'm like, thank you, I'll take in consideration. Yes. I'll see how it all works. And it's so important that when you actually draw firm boundaries, people actually respect you more, as opposed to kind of like absorbing everybody's opinion and being like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? I'm not doing it that way and this way. Number 5 is that we cannot go into the comparison and competition rabbit hole.
Oh yeah.
Because I think that puts added unnecessary stress to our minds and our bodies. So those are, I think, like, just a quick, but those are massive work, because those are habitual patterns that we've developed for decades.
Absolutely.
And so as mothers, we have to really be vigilant. And if you're listening to this before your baby's born, or even if you're before number 2 is born, number 3, now is the time to do it. But other than that, the best time is now to replace some of these thought patterns that we've been conditioned to by our culture. So that helps. Is that helpful?
Yes, very. Yeah. And I think being able to manage yourself and that anxiety ahead of time is helpful. I can't tell you how many times when I worked postpartum as a nurse, the parents would call us into the room and the baby would be crying and they could not get the baby to calm down, and they'd say, I don't know what she won't sleep, he won't eat, and as soon as we pushed that baby through the doorway, they would conk out, and they were feeding off of their parents' stress in the room. Babies are so intuitive, and they really do feed off of how we're feeling. So I think it's such a benefit if you can tackle that early on, how to manage your mind, how to manage that anxiety and stress ahead of time, it's just going to benefit you and your child, before.
And that's not something to take lightly. I think Brene Brown talks about anxiety is the most contagious affect.
Yes.
And so to think that our children are not experiencing our anxiety is actually kind of almost in denial about how our brains and how we're so connected human being. So, they release cortisol hormones. They're drinking off your nursing. They're drinking off, but also we're emitting it. Like we're literally emitting all these, like, if you ever met somebody who's like so anxious and stressed, you can like feel their stress and it kind of makes you feel like, oh my gosh, I just,
it's like palpable.
Yeah, you can feel it. And there's actually scientific evidence, which I am not a scientist, so I'm not going to go in there, but, there's scientific evidence that you actually experience those pheromones, those cortisol hormones that are emitting throughout our bodies. So I think it's important just to know that, even so that we can be convinced and convicted about managing it.
Yes.
And I guess my question to you, Shannon, is how has this awareness changed the way you show up as a mom of managing just our mind? Just even most women are never taught to even like, we have Lamaze class and birthing class and all this. And I'm like, what about mind management for moms?
Oh my gosh, it's so needed. I mean, really, because I came into the women's school right before I had my number 7. And so, literally like a week before I had her. And it changed my entire postpartum experience, just being able to manage my thoughts and my mind. And I also just noticed that the environment around, like, because I feel like mothers were like the compass of the house. And whenever we're off or thrown off, the house is just thrown off.
Everyone's off.
Everyone's off. Usually if there's something going around in the house, it's like, okay, you almost have to like check yourself. Okay, where am I at emotionally? And usually it's those days that I feel like I'm really fighting it to like kind of keep it together is when my family is like totally off.
Yeah.
So, but having that skill really changed the whole postpartum experience, because I felt like I was able to kind of even look at things from a different perspective of, it's almost like you're giving yourself permission for things to happen, but it's not happening to you, it's happening for you.
Yeah.
And okay, so why is this happening for me? Now it's to the point, like if the baby's up 3 times a night, I'm like, okay, why is this happening for me? Maybe I need to pray some more. So like I'll take the time and try and do something productive with it if I'm awake, but I feel like every opportunity given to you is for you. And so if you can at least even realize that, that's huge.
Yeah.
I feel like that's changed my whole perspective.
And I think perspective is what shapes the way we see a crying baby or a, baby in the NICU or children that are defiant. But yeah, so I think that's really massive. For me, I had 4 under 4, and I remember because somebody prepared me, it wasn't like Janie had all these special powers. I had a mentor who helped me so many of these, I would say my management skills and emotional command that helped me transition, that really I didn't realize how it helped my motherhood. But, I couldn't connect the dots. I was connecting it as a teacher. I was like, I had 4 under 4, but it was, I felt like it wasn't stressful. It was just, you just do. And I think one of the things that was drilled to me is that you find a solution. You don't sit in the anxiety, because I think that makes you more anxious. Like, oh my gosh, I am right here. I'm like, what's the solution here, January? And that's always so helpful, is to be that woman of solution. So,
yes.
So I do think that it's just a lack of preparation. Nothing's wrong with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
We just need training. That's
just
it.
more formation.
Yep. So awesome. Right.
Yeah.
We can, next question.
Well, bridging off of that, so you talk about mind management, also with self-image, even having a strong self-image. That's another thing that you can work on leading up to it, because I feel like as you have older kids who challenge you more and you have to set more boundaries, if we question our decision making, or if we question ourselves and our lack of, or our judgment, we can falter and not be firm in making decisions, and that can cause a lot of stress too.
Indecision causes a lot of stress.
Yeah, sure.
But so self-image it's massive. It's life-changing. Most women assume it's body image, because that's the way our culture actually presumes, and there's an assumption that subconscious, we don't even think about it, because most women that I ask about, how you define your self-image, it's automatically, well, like, I love my body. And you can tell by the response, the definition of it. With self-image is really the opinion we hold of ourselves. And it's been developed over time. And so what happens as mom is that we shape opinions of who we are and who we're not based on how we were raised, on the things that we're told we were. You're just not really good at motherhood. You're just really not nurturing. You're just really bad at the kitchen. All these things that are projection of who we are and who we're not. If we don't know actually have the script to change that and also redesign our self-image, we could become a victim to other people's opinion for the rest of our life.
Yeah. And people like to share their opinions a lot.
A dime a dozen. So our self-image is really in the opinion that we hold of ourselves. But the most beautiful thing is that we can actually design our self-image. I can say, I'm a grateful mom. I am firm with my boundaries. I can make a decision and then learn the skill to become that woman so that I don't become a victim to what everyone else thinks I should or not be. And it really changes the way we look at opinions.
Yeah.
And that way, a lot of times, like, if our daughter is like, oh, you're so horrible. I see, like, children look at the mom and like, you're so horrible. And the mom doesn't say anything, first of all, because she doesn't think she deserves to say something and draw a boundary because nobody taught her and not a fault to her own. But then she internalizes it. And then what happens in our brain, if we understand neurons, is that through the process of repetition, just like we learn language, we start to actually believe these lies, right? I'm just a horrible mom, so on. So if we were never taught to draw a boundary, and then we start to actually presume all the opinions, and then they become our opinion of ourselves, and then we find evidence of why we're a horrible mom all day long when we don't have everything together.
Yeah.
So the self-image is a massive preparation work for moms. And January, they always say, January, you've got this all figured out, you're a mom of 8. I'm like, no, I'm actually recalibrating my self-image now. And it's like learning how to fish. It's learning how to redesign and design your self-image to accommodate the season of your life.
Absolutely.
So, I am going to have a whole training on self-image as a postpartum mom, but it's life-altering to understand what that means.
Yeah.
Self-image. So the other thing that I think is important for moms and for postpartum is routines. And it's one of those things that, when I was always training moms with routines, I get a lot of retaliation. I honestly did.
Really?
And it's like, you can't put a baby in a routine. You've got to go with a child. And all of that, I believe, does not conflict with, I think, how we should mother. So here's what I believe is important as mothers. We have to see the whole house. We have to see the big picture. And we have to understand that there's, for me at least, there's a 4-year-old, and then there's a 5-year-old, there's a 1-year-old, and then so I have to decide and dream about how I want my home to be. So a lot of times we're first of all, we're not taught to dream as mothers, because that's when you're supposed to hang your hat of your dreams. I defy it. I disagree with it, and we train against it. But if we don't have a dream about how our home is supposed to be like, and for me, my dream is to keep a house that's peaceful. And that doesn't mean there's no screaming and fighting and but that there's a culture of peace. That's my dream. That's what I try to uphold. And so from that dream, I say, now what kind of routine do I need to build to keep that peace? So it's working from the dream backwards, not reactive and then trying to find what the dream is. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. So it's deciding, okay, I want to be able to have great conversation with my children. That's the dream, connecting. And so we build a rhythm of life based on the dream. And my dream is simple for my house. It's to have harmony and peace, and to raise children that are going to create, impact in the world. That sounds so easy. It's a piece of cake. That's a simple dream. And so from there, then I can make a decision. So what does that look like in my routine and my rhythm of life? What does that look like in me cultivating a rhythm of life for my toddler? So for me, I build a routine from the hospital. Like, it's so habitual, but I don't build a routine just for my baby. I build a routine for the whole family. It's a skill, and it's a compounding skill set. And so right now at week 2, I'm basically timing my 2-week-old and my toddler to have the same morning nap and afternoon nap, so that they're creating a routine that allows me to be present to my other children, but also allows me to be present to say, okay, I can, make sure I have a conversation with my husband late at night, or that I can, have half an hour to make a quick meal that I know would be great in the evening that my children would prefer. What I'm saying is that there's a lot of movement, a lot of but does that make sense? It's creating a routine that allows for the harmony. Now, is it perfectly done? Absolutely not. Is it a work in progress? Absolutely. But it's working from the dream backwards. Does that make sense?
It does. So what would you say to people that, because I get this question a lot from other mothers, where you see the design of how you want your day to go, you've kind of labeled your desires of what you want out of your day with your children and all that. What do you do when it doesn't go as planned? Like how do you recalibrate and pivot and
you detach from the outcome, and that's a skill in itself. I think most of these things that I teach women are just skills. They're not, they're disciplines, they're thought patterns, they're reactions that need to be trained. Like our reaction should be trained. If we have an anxious reaction for things that are out of control, we can retrain it. It's just a rewiring in our brain. So boundaries is a skill. Learning to time manage is a skill. Learning to get a rhythm of life is a skill. Learning to recalibrate is a skill. So for example, with Zig, he's getting up. So I put him down at he gets up like around 12, 3, and 6. Right. So I've kind of built a routine where he gets up every 2.5 hours. But in NICU, that's what they did.
Yeah.
So I'm literally kind of piggybacking on the NICU schedule, and that's what my first child did. So I was sort of providential. He was the NICU. I piggybacked on their routine. But then he, was up at 2.5. So I just recalibrate.
Yeah.
And then you're always constantly strategizing. and that's why we need to look at every part of our life so that we're not mentally exhausted. We need to make sure that we eat healthy. We need to make sure that we know how to ask for help as a skill set, So like at 6 o'clock or roughly between 6 and 7, I'm like, Ryan, can you just, after I feed him, I'm like, can you take him? And can you change him and then just kind of, swaddle him back up and then put him down. And then I get another half hour sleep. And Ryan, the girls kind of come in here in my room. So Ryan's like, give mommy another half hour, so he protects me. So I'm very intentional about what I need and what I don't need. I speak up.
Communicating that's big.
Yeah, but that's a skill in itself.
Yes.
So that's why when I talk about postpartum, I'm like, do you know the amount of skill set we actually need to acquire?
So many.
And the robbery is that why isn't anybody teaching us these skills?
Yes.
Because they're just simple skills. They're boundary skills. They're, communication skills. They're creating a routine, or learning how to clean the kitchen quickly. All these different things, they are compounding that helps us sort of manage this. So that's what gets me frustrated, because I feel like, why are we not equipping women before they feel like they're drowning? Because that's all there is and I remember when I was in college or after college, I had a mentor who basically trained me in the kitchen. I was in charge of the kitchen, and she was like, you have half hour to clean the whole kitchen for 12 women. And then I was also cooking, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't realize that training changed my motherhood.
Oh my gosh. Is that where you really first learned to do all your cook as you clean, clean as you cook?
Well, my dad also kind of taught me that, cook as you clean. But I didn't think I really cooked much as a young girl because my parents cooked a lot. I'm trying to recall. And in college, I didn't cook because we were in the dorms.
Right.
We went to college together. We went in the dorms. So I think it was afterwards that I just learned. But it was I was in my mid-20s. I would watch the cooking show. But what I had was cleaning skills and preparation skills. Because at 2021, I was in charge of the kitchen. And I had to cook for 12 women. I had to plan all the menu.
Oh, wow.
For 12 women. And then I had and it was a menu that was make sure I had an appetizer, I had a dessert. So it was But I also had to delegate, like, who was making the dessert, and or I don't think I was all in charge of it. But then I had to work with donations from food. It wasn't like
Oh, wow.
I could, I'm just recalling this actually. I had to work with it because it was missionary work, so I had to work with donations. So it wasn't like I planned this elaborate, so I had to basically cook what was in the pantry.
Okay.
And that was a skill in itself.
That's a big skill.
That's a huge skill. And so, when I teach my children, I'm like, figure out something. And so leftovers could be totally, what is it called? A fancy meal. I mean, you just like make it work.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a skill that moms should learn. And it's not like being a gourmet chef, that's the word gourmet, but it's just learning some of the most basic things.
Yes. No one taught me that either.
Yeah, and I don't think I cook. I do on Instagram, like, I don't make anything fancy. I really don't. Like, things because I've had to do it quickly. Cleaning as we cook is important. Learning to make the bed quickly. So all these are so profoundly important.
Yeah.
And they're so, like, little, but they matter.
It all lays out your day.
Yeah, because then as a postpartum, you think you're just dealing with a baby, and you're like, just kidding. I still have to do bills. I still have to cook the kitchen. I still have to clean the toilet. I still have to. There's so many things. It's not really the baby almost, and it is, but it's because there's so many things weighing on us on top of this, like, life-changing baby transition.
Sure.
That it feels like you're drowning, and we don't live in a world where our mothers are next to us, except when you're an awesome Miss Gigi. You decide to live next here.
Right.
We don't have our, we don't live in that society anymore where our mothers next to us, our aunts next to us, they're giving us advice.
Right.
Yeah, and I share this all the time. I'm like, even right now when you're in the kitchen and you're trying to teach, how to cook, they're on their phone. They're not observing through osmosis. Right. We live in a different world, and I remember when I was just kind of observing and doing a lot of studies on this, and it's like, oh, my mom was such a great cook. You know how to cook? No. And it was like classic case. And it was a lot of times when the internet changed and the entertainment, their moms were great cook, and maybe their mom tried to teach them, but there were just so many distractions.
Yeah.
So what's my point in all this? My point is that there's so many skills that we've been deprived of, but the hopeful thing is that we can incrementally learn it.
Right.
And to also give ourselves permission that if we don't, there is so much hope. And sure, it might mean that there's a little bit of a, kind of like a frustrating situation, but that's just part of, I think, the fact that we've been robbed.
Yeah.
Right? But better late now than being resentful for a lifetime.
Absolutely. And taking it one step at a time.
Mm-hmm. And
you don't have to acquire all those skills overnight either.
Mm-hmm. But I think being around a community of women that are growing together and learning skills together, I think is helpful, because the culture has been, it's a comparison and competition.
Yes.
But if you could be in a culture where everybody's like, well, I'm just learning it right alongside you, and we're doing it, I think that changes the game. And that's
collaboration.
Yes, and I think that's what we're trying to do in the women's school, is that how can we learn from each other? How can we collaborate? How can we learn all this together? Because clearly we haven't been taught. Mm-hmm. And I find that this is a big thing. I feel like a lot of times mothers feel like they're not successful because success has been defined outside of the home. And here's the reality, is that you can make hundreds of millions of dollars and achieve external success, but if you're home and your kids are not healthy or happy or peaceful, or your home life seems like it's not the way you want to be, it's not gonna be fulfilling. Right. It's something that's going to be missing in our life. So that's been a lie that's sold to us. I think success should be defined, and it was defined in the women's code as a capacity to impact human behavior to its highest good. So it's impacting my children, my spouse, my work life, everything, so that we're constantly emitting and inspiring people to become their best version of ourselves. And that's how we should define success, so that mothers are entitled to feel as though they are successful because they're home and not defined by a culture who only values parts of the woman. So I get kind of feisty about that.
I love that.
So I think, this is a great ongoing conversation. I really, but I think to wrap it up, I think that there's so much hope, and Shannon, maybe you can speak on that. and that we're not stuck, and that we can actually grow together as mothers and redefine.
I think that's the key word, is to let women know that you're not stuck where you are. You can redefine, even if you've been doing it the same way, even if you're on baby 4, baby 20. I mean, like, really, it doesn't matter. It's never too late to start redefining who and deciding who you want to be. You know,
you're choosing to be. Exactly.
Right, exactly. Because I think a lot of women think, well, I've been doing it for the song, there's no point in changing it now. But if you're not happy and you're not peaceful, you don't have to stay stuck there. Yeah. You can change and redesign the mom you want to be.
Yeah, and I think regret is a painful thing.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
You know, and a lot of times we just sort of get numb to it. But I think it's time. I think we have a responsibility to the next generation to say, this is not the way women ought to operate. We're not supposed to be separated from motherhood to our work life. We're supposed to integrate, and that our fulfillment is integrated.
Yeah.
And if we choose to be, you know, mothers who work from home or outside our home, everywhere in between, the external does not define our self-worth. We're not defined by what the opinions or what the metric of success is, and I think that's important. So this could be continued to next. Here we go. Day, did we say 14? I can't remember. 14. Hi, 2 weeks.
So, yeah.
Yeah, 2 weeks. Awesome. Thank you, Shani, so much.
Thank
For
you.
this conversation, and we might have another conversation after this.